Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Nicole, and on today's episode, we're going to talk about gut health and the balance of microorganisms in the gut. But we're going to focus on something a little bit unusual when we talk about the gut microbiome, and that is fungus. When we talk about the gut microbiome, typically on this show, we've tended to focus on more of the bacteria aspect of that. But the microbiome is actually a community of all different types of microorganisms, not just bacteria. And if we want to support our children's brain and body health, we need to keep all of those gut microorganisms balanced. So to help us understand the important role that fungi play in gut health, I've invited Dr. Mahmoud Ghannoum on the show today. Let me tell you a little bit about him. He's one of the world's leading microbiome researchers and the scientist who named the mycobiome our body's fungal community. He lectures at many institutions globally, including the National Institutes of Health, on the microbiome and his breakthrough research on probiotics. He's published over 400 papers on his research and has been cited over 20,000 times by other scientists. For over 25 years, he's been funded by the NIH, who've provided Dr. Ghannoum with over $50 million in grant funding. Super impressive researcher. He also has a new book called Total Gut Balance that provides information and strategies for balancing both bacteria and fungi for optimal health. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today, Dr. Ghannoum. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate your kind introduction and for inviting me as well.
Well, I'm so excited to have you because we talk on this show quite a bit about the importance of gut health to support brain health for children and adults. But, you know, as I said in the intro, we tend to focus more on the bacterial aspects. And that's why I'm so excited to have you, because you've done so much research, not just on the gut microbiome in general, but particularly on, the fungal communities there. So let's start by defining this. We've heard about the microbiome, but talk to us about what is the mycobiome?
Well, it will be my pleasure. As you mentioned, our gut, in fact, also on our skin, different parts of our body, we not only have bacteria, but we also have fungi. We also have viruses, and as well as some parasites in our gut, for example. So that we started really very long time ago. I stopped for a minute because I was thinking how long. It's over 40 years ago.
Wow.
When I figured that there is a relation between bacteria and fungus in our body. Mm-hmm. And how I did know that, my mentor, when I was doing my doctorate in England, he gave me a paper and he says, this is what you are gonna be working on. And lo and behold, I've been spending all my life doing that, not just my PhD. And that paper, what it shows that when you take an antibiotic, what happens, you kill the bacteria, which is the good and the bad one. And at the same time, this gives the opportunity for the fungus to overgrow. Mm-hmm. That's why, for example, kids, since your audience are mostly kids, when they have antibiotics, guess what happened? They have thrush in their mouth, for example, especially little babies. So that's when I said, we really need to start looking at both bacteria and fungus. Mm-hmm. So fast forward, 2010, I wrote an article because, as you mentioned, everybody, you go to these meetings about the microbiome, and all what they talk about is bacteria. And I wrote an article. I said, no, we really need to look at this. And I told them the story, by the way, which I just said. And the good news now, people start to see that not only our research, but those of others starting to see that really bacteria and fungus, they work together towards our good or our bad. And that's really delightful, because I think by addressing both bacteria and fungus, we are gonna try to help people with respect to their gut health and overall health as well.
Yeah, it's so true that the focus tends to be on the bacteria. And I think when we do talk about fungus, particularly in the gut, it's mostly in a negative way, right? People are usually familiar with, things like candida overgrowth, fungal overgrowth. So it's usually talked about as, oh, that's a bad thing. But what you're saying is that actually the fungi do important things in the body. We need to have those in balance. So I'd like you to talk about that. What are some of the ways that the microbiome impacts us for good and for bad?
That's very, very good question. And you are absolutely right. We always are frightened with candida, and everybody really says, oh, all types of diseases goes to it. And when people know that they have some candida in their gut or in their mouth, they get worried. I'm here to tell you that 50% of the people can have candida in their gut. Mm-hmm. However, these are colonizers, which means they colonize, they live in our body, helping us and helping themselves. It's a good environment for them. And I give you one example how really candida, when it is at low level or low abundance, as we say, can help us. It can break down some complex molecules, nutrients we eat, like carbohydrate, complex carbohydrate, which gives food to the beneficial bacteria, which again break it down, where candida use the break down product. And all of this help us from the nutritional point of view, and also helps us because we are encouraging the growth of good bacteria, which keeps the overgrowth of candida under control. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing. Also, it is not only candida in our body. There are some good yeast, as you mentioned, such as Saccharomyces. We all know about Saccharomyces, like baker's yeast, for example. This is very good. And studies have shown that having this good yeast in our body, Saccharomyces, particularly one species called Boulardii, Saccharomyces boulardii, can keep candida under control. So you are absolutely right. It's both helpful and harmful, especially when it overgrows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know that the Saccharomyces in particular, there are a lot of formulations now, probiotic formulations and things that incorporate those. But I think that's tricky, right? Because you can have too much of that too. I mean, it's the balance of that, right? And I get concerned because sometimes people say, oh, I read something about this, so I went out and, got this. Now I'm supplementing, with all these different things, which may or may not be helpful, right?
Absolutely. My motto in general is that moderation is the way to go. Mm-hmm. Sometimes people, they think the more you take, the better. It's not that. As long as you have a balanced gut, you can supplement it and help it by really not only having probiotics, by eating better, okay? Mm-hmm. And then as long as the balance is maintained, you are gonna be fine. The problem we'll start to have if we have an overgrowth of the pathogenic organisms or organisms that can cause disease, then we need to take more drastic measures, as you will, to try to keep it under control, which is really, even though I use drastic because of the fact that overgrowth, people are worried about it, there are ways which we can follow, dietary, as well as some supplements, which gonna help us and even get very, very rebalanced and also maintain this balance in our gut, and therefore we are going to feel much better.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a few minutes ago about, you gave the example of antibiotics and how this kind of first came on your radar reading a paper about antibiotics, and they kill, not only the bad, but also the good bacteria, but they also change the balance in the microbiome to allow things like thrush to happen and those kinds of things. So I'd like to have you talk a little bit about antibiotics and other things. What are things that we do or that we take that disrupt the balance of the fungal community in our gut in a bad way?
Yeah.
How are we damaging that important fungal community?
There is a big list of over-the-counter medications, like, for example, non-steroidal analgesic or painkillers, okay? Mm-hmm. Then you have a lot of these people for when they have for GERD, for example, they take for anti-acid product. Right. These all have been shown to really disturb the balance. They affect the the balance of good bacteria and good fungus together. And then by affecting one, we will have a problem. The other way also is what some of these products, what they do, they affect the beneficial bacteria and allow other bacteria to grow, which are what we call pro-inflammatory, which means they increase our inflammation, okay? So these are some of the factors that could affect it. Also, the way we live, lifestyle, is very, very important. You know, we should exercise. Exercise have been shown to be very good for balancing our gut. You need to sleep well. And by the way, stress is a huge player, as you know. And we are all stressed. We all working hard, like especially for the ladies, they work during the day, then you go home and take care of the kids. It's very stressful life. So because of this, it's very important for us to try to lower our stress level. And I recommend, you know, people should do some yoga. I give you a laugh. I never did yoga before, but now I go and I'm the only male there. And I say, oh my God, men should go there.
That's right.
It really relieves you, you know? So that's very good. Sometimes during the day, because we are all running around like headless chicken, as you may say, and, you know, take 15 minutes and just meditate. Just don't think about anything. And that, I think, goes a long way to help us have balancing our gut.
Well, I think that's, you know, it's true for kids too. I see a lot of complicated cases at my clinic, and some children and teenagers who have had a really unbalanced gut for a long time, have constant problems with like candida overgrowth, these kinds of things, and parents who are doing all of these intensive treatments for that, but it creates so much stress. The kids are so stressed out all the time that I really feel that that's a factor in why they don't truly get better. You know, I mean, certainly diet changes and, you know, medications and supplements and all those things can help, but I think it's important if parents are saying, I'm doing all those things and we're not really getting good progress, I think looking at the stress level for the child is a really important factor.
Oh, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And unfortunately, in our days now, I remember when I was a young boy, I go and play outside, you know, right. And my mom, the only condition she used to tell me, you have to be back at home before the sunset.
Right.
So, you know, now we cannot do this. We have our kids, you know, which is understandable, of course, different times, different things happening. We need to watch them all the time. We need to do this. But I really think it's very important to allow our kid play and relax. You know, we tend now to, as you mentioned, a lot of families, they have overbooked their kids. They do one activity after the other. In fact, let them just sometimes go play in the yard. This is another thing which is really going to help them, because, you know, they get exposed to germs outside in the soil, which is fine, because that will train their body to fight germs. So they need to do that. Let them play with the dog. Let us help them to go hike. All of this is really very important. It helps them both ways. First of all, they are going to be more relaxed. They are going to try to improve their microbiome, which is good for them. And also, it's lovely to be outside. We have a great country. We have lovely national parks, and they are close to us. So if the kids are engaged in these activities rather than one thing after the other and sitting in front of the television and playing with their iBox and, you know, Xbox. So this will be very helpful. Absolutely what you said.
Yeah. You're speaking my language. That's exactly the kind of thing that I, you know, talk with parents about. So let's talk a bit about how might somebody know if they have a balanced or an imbalanced gut, particularly when it comes to, you know, fungi. How might somebody know if they have an imbalance there?
I mean, there are a couple of things. Number one is you really need to listen to your body. If you have pain, if you have sometimes fatigue, if you have a little bit of diarrhea, you know, all of that tells you there is something wrong in our balance of the gut. But there are now other ways where you can actually, the kids can do gut testing. You know, we have the technology advanced so much, like this next generation sequencing, where you can send a poop or stool sample, and then it can be analyzed to see, is it balanced or is it imbalanced? And based on this, you can have a way to really start eating better, doing other activities, as we mentioned, lifestyle, to improve your gut balance again. So two things. One, you listen to your body, and number two, there are more practical, but I think not everybody can go and do those tests, even though they are at home. Listen to your body, it will help you a lot. Mm-hmm. And in fact, in the book, which you mentioned, Total Gut Balance, I made a checklist where if you check more than 3 sort of things in it, then what happens? You may have dysbiosis, okay? Mm-hmm. So that could be a guide for people as well.
Yeah, that's very helpful, because I think some of the things that I see in children who have, yeast overgrowth, dysbiosis, in their gut, is they may have the GI symptoms, like you mentioned, diarrhea, some pain, things like that. But I see a lot of brain-based symptoms in those kids with the fungal overgrowth in particular. Like some children, I see a lot of hyperactivity, a lot of just really disorganized, not thinking clearly, kind of overly silly behavior, just a lot of problems managing themselves. And I think a lot of times people don't recognize that those kinds of symptoms in the brain are related to this dysbiosis or this imbalance that's going on in the gut.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, first, one of the, I will talk about the gut-brain axis in a minute, but before, the same sort of thing, we are looking at kids with autism. Mm-hmm. And then we just completed a study, which I'm hoping to publish very soon, where we showed that there is imbalance in the gut, both bacterial and fungal imbalance, and that's really compared to controls. Mm-hmm. But let's go back. Why I mentioned autism, because it's to do with the gut-brain axis as well. So before, we always thought our brain will direct everything in our body. Mm-hmm. And now we are starting to figure out, no, there is a bi-directional communication. Mm-hmm. Sort of our gut and brain, they talk together. And it's not always the brain telling our gut, it's also our gut tells the brain, So if the brain, its job is try to keep imbalance in our gut. Now, if we don't have this balance, to keep balance, if we don't have this balance, then you will start to have gut-related issues, dysbiosis, okay, or imbalance. Now, the other way, if we are doing something which affect our gut microbiome, these organisms start to secrete some molecules or small compounds that could trigger, for example, serotonin in our brain, okay? And this serotonin, as you know, it's to do with the mood. Mm-hmm. So it affects our mood. And that's why we really now finding it with a number of regenerative diseases, that this gut-brain axis plays a very important role in that. And that's why, at least, we want to try to control the gut by balancing our microbiome, and that's going to improve our mood, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and with the mood in kids especially comes the behavior too, because, a lot of parents have such challenges with different kinds of behavior with their children, but the gut is so related to that. Kids who are just irritable or, angry all the time and lashing out, or, like I said, hyperactive, all of those things are directed so much by what's going on in the gut. And I find in particular with the fungal overgrowth, the candida overgrowth issues, that it can be hard because, you do testing and you discover that there is, overgrowth there. And, a lot of times people think, well, we just treat that. We use an antifungal medication, or, we'll change the diet or whatever. And then, okay, now we don't have to worry about that anymore. But that's not really how it works, is it?
No, it's not, definitely not. And one of the things which is ADHD, attention deficit, definitely have been shown that this is due to imbalance in the gut. Mm-hmm. So you are absolutely right. And it is not always medication. That's the good news. For a long time, we only try to treat a disease. Yeah. Now we are starting to figure out, you know what, maybe it's better to prevent it. And in this way, we know if Candida overgrow, it's gonna cause issues. So what we want to do is we want to make dietary approaches as well as lifestyle. Both of them are very important to try to keep that under control. Mm-hmm. And the good news also is that we already know what sort of food or what sort of vitamins, for example, is gonna help you to keep Candida under control, while at the same time we encourage the beneficial organism, such as good bacteria like lactobacillus or bifidobacterium, for example, or for that matter, the good fungus which we talked about, Saccharomyces.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that, because I know that in the book you provide some really specific strategies and information for people about how they can improve the gut health, how they can keep the fungal community balance, bacterial community balance. So you just mentioned that the good news is that we know certain kinds of food, certain kinds of nutrients that are helpful. What are some of the things that people should be incorporating in their diet in order to have good gut balance? And maybe also let's talk about things that make that worse, that create dysbiosis.
Good. That's a really good question. So after my research over the last now nearly 2 decades, looking at the gut imbalance as well as how to adjust it, that's when I start thinking, because people start reaching out to me saying, what can we do about it? Mm-hmm. And then we did a big literature search. I had my team, they studied the literature, what's published, but from our group as well as others, and we put this diet. So this diet is a new way for us to let our microbiome play good for our wellness, okay, by specifically targeting the fungus, okay, or the mycobiome, as you say, the microbial community. At the same time, to try to encourage the growth of beneficial bacteria as well as yeast. So how can we limit? So number one, we need to limit fungus. To do that, it's well known that sugar is a great offender. Fungus loves, especially Candida loves sugars. So having a low carb diet is good. It doesn't mean that no carb, it's low carb, okay? That's one thing. Also, studies have shown that lean proteins from, let's say, plants or even animals, from fish, from chicken, is also good for you. So if you have those, you have good mono unsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, all will help limit Candida. One last thing, studies have shown that if you have some vitamin deficiency, okay, such as in A, C, and B vitamins, Candida loves it. So that's why if you have a vitamin deficiency, start to eat some food, some vegetables. Like now we are talking about, Thanksgiving is coming and pumpkin season. It's a great source of some of these vitamins, as well as it's a great source for fiber, which will support the beneficial bacteria as well. So first thing, let's limit it by cutting down the sugar, trying to, as I said, have the right vitamins and also a lean protein. Now we need to encourage the good bacteria. How can we do that? One of the greatest way is to use food, plant, vegetable, that has a lot of fiber, as well as resistant starch. Resistant starch, I know it's a new term. People they are not familiar with it. You can find it in bananas, which is unripened bananas, in oatmeal, in a lot of beans, different types of beans, you know, which could act as good fiber source as well as good fatty acid source. So all of this will really try to encourage the good ones. One last thing, remember we said bacteria and fungus, they come together to cause trouble. They make what we call biofilm, or what we call it digestive plaque. It's like the plaque in our teeth. Every morning we brush our teeth so that to get rid of the plaque, otherwise we are gonna have periodontitis or infection of our gum. Now, the same happens in the gut. Because of this, we need to break this digestive plaque, like we break the plaque in our teeth. And doing that, there are also good food to use. Like garlic, for example, is very good. Apple cider vinegar is great. You know, you have, for example, some good fatty acid, linoleic acid will be good. Coconut oil at certain, you know, not too much of it also helps. So we inhibit the bad one, encourage the good one, and get rid of this digestive plaque. By doing this, you are gonna have a good balance of both bacteria and fungi, and that's gonna help you with your GI symptom or gastrointestinal symptom. You are gonna have less diarrhea, less constipation, and also, you know, one thing we did a study, one thing which was good to see is that people also can control their weight. You know, they lost 10 pounds and that. So all in all, once you improve your total gut balance, you are gonna have hopefully a better GI or gut health as well as overall health.
It's so interesting. I like that you talked about the biofilms or the digestive plaque. That's something that many people don't talk about, and it's helpful to think about it in the same way as on our teeth, because we are aware of the plaque, you know, on our teeth, but that same idea of we need to get rid of that in our digestive system on a daily basis as well. And so knowing what kinds of foods can help do that is so important. And the thing is, all the foods that you mentioned are all things that we can work into not only our diet as adults, but that we can give to our kids too. Sometimes we have to get a little creative, you know, about working that in, but to move kids towards more of a whole foods diet that incorporates these, you know, vegetables, the resistant starches, those kinds of things, that's really how we start to get ahead of these problems, as opposed to staying in a cycle of, you know, just giving an antifungal medication and then the candida comes back. And, you know, there's more things that we need to be doing.
I really agree with you. Look, I mean, if somebody has a real fungal infection, then you need to treat with antifungal. That's no doubt about it. And you know, candida can cause serious infection, like systemic infection, apart from thrush or vaginal candidiasis and this sort of thing, that we need to treat with antifungal. But this is not the way. We want to really get it before it starts causing trouble. Okay, and you are absolutely right. If we can control the type of food we eat, the type of things we do, overall, it's gonna really improve. With respect to the biofilm, you know, it's very interesting. You are absolutely right. People don't think about it. The interesting stuff, I was funded by the National Institute of Health many years ago to study biofilm, but on catheters. You know, when somebody go to hospital, they put a catheter to give them medication, or if it is a baby, they want to give him new food because sometimes, you know, they can't eat. So what happens, candida comes and stick to the catheter and it makes biofilm. So to me, when I started to figure out about the gut, we had so much information about the biofilms from really serious infection, hospital-acquired infection, that it really helped us to say, okay, what can we do to manage this? And that's why, as you mentioned, we proposed, let's do it through diet, let's do it through good lifestyle, rather than, you know, before it happens and cause problems.
Such your career has just been so fascinating. I mean, I feel like I could talk to you for hours about all the research that you've done, and I love that you've taken the research on some really specific, severe problems, and then you've looked at it and generalized it and said, well, here's how we can apply this to help all of us be healthier. And I think that's really an amazing thing. And, obviously, we have so much that we owe you and your research in terms of just understanding all of this. It's really incredible. So I want you to, while we wrap up here, to tell people a little bit about the book and where they can get the book, because I really want to encourage listeners to get it.
Thank you very much. So this book, as I mentioned, it's going to be published, Norton Publishers, countrywide. It was one of their affiliates. It's going to be published there. It's called Total Gut Balance. It's already on Amazon. It's going to be published December 24th of this year. But also I like people to visit. I have a website, Dr. Microbiome. It's drmicrobiome.com. You have a lot of information and tips about that is in the book. Also, if they can visit totalgutbook.com, totalgutbook.com, also there they will find it. And we are really trying to provide a lot of instruction how to use the diet. And what excites me about this is it's gonna hopefully make a difference in the kids' lives.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's such a practical book. And I really want to encourage all of you listening to check out not only the book, but as he mentioned at the website, so many great resources and pieces of information there. So we'll have all those links with the show notes so everybody can check all that out. Dr. Ghannoum, it's been wonderful to have you with us today. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview.
Oh, it was a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me. Have a great day.
And thanks to all of you for listening to this episode. We'll see you next time on the Better Behavior Show.